Well, here we are. Time to spill the beans on this new bike sponsor I've been teasing for months now. This will be the first bike I've built in my updated workshop, and even though it's not finished, I just can't wait any longer. I've no workbench yet, so I've borrowed Jane's sewing table and for the first time ever, organised my parts to make building easier. I've got some pretty nice parts for this one. But not everything is new. For the time being, I still have the well-used workstand which a cute thief stole from Danny and Duncan when we moved out of our flat. This thing is covered in memories from previous builds, but it will be replaced by something pretty fancy. Keep an eye out for upcoming Bike Cave episodes soon. Seeing as I'm about to handle something very special, I donned some protective gloves. And it doesn't get much more special than the cute thief. Despite the garage build making bike builds difficult, he hasn't been slacking with the thievery and he's collected some pretty sweet retro builds for future content. But today he gets a rest. This is a new bike. What a treat for us both. Now, plenty of people have tried to guess what brand my new sponsor is, but practically no one guessed right. But the clues were out there. Here's a video I made a couple of years ago that clearly gives things away. Whoop, hang on, that's not right. There, that's better. See, it was in plain sight all along. The cute thief was in on it too, giving clues to the model I was getting. So, if those carefully laid clues passed you by, then here it is, my Pivot Shadow Cat. I almost didn't approach Pivot, as I didn't think such a boutique brand would be interested in little old me. However, you don't get if you don't ask, and even if it's taken a while, I couldn't be happier with the result. The immediate first impressions is that this frame is light. So I'm taking it easy clamping the frame before I fit the seat post. In fact, let's fit the post now, starting with the clamp. This is from Wolftooth. I should probably mention that this bike deal happened through the UK pivot distributor Saddleback, and they've helped me out with other brands they import, such as Wolftooth. I took a trip to B&Q to get the cheapest grease and paintbrush they had. No expense spared for the most high-end bike I've ever built. Well, at least it's better than the zero grease I normally use on seat clamps. More Wolftooth parts. This time they're 200mm resolved dropper post. I've heard good things about these. It's one of the lightest and lowest profile droppers on the market, which means I can get it nice and low for the stunts. This excites me, as I've only ever used a 175mm RockShox model before, so this should be a nice upgrade. As I fit this, I must mention that I love the fact the frame has a seat clamp slot on the front. Less of the Scottish mud will end up in the frame this way. Just need to make sure the grease is spread evenly and then give it a wipe. Now I can clamp the frame properly for building. Oi, less giggling at the back. So, why am I so stoked to have this frame? Well, obviously the paint is fabulous. I'm a fan of brighter bikes. It means they stand out more when filming or taking photos. The DW linkage is a decent platform too. Efficient, which obviously helps with climbing, but also should be decent for quick power delivery when doing trials jibs. This frame also has a few nice details, like lots of decent padding to stop chain slap. It even extends up the seat stay, which isn't something I often see, and I do like quiet bikes. There's other nice details like the drainage hole in the pocket where the shock sits, and a little rubber mudguard around the lower linkage to stop mud and debris getting stuck and crushed in there. You'd never think this bike was designed in arid Arizona. We've also got beefy 180mm post mounts at the rear, and multiple water bottle or accessory mounts in the frame. Actually, this mount's flipping all over the place. Under the top tube there's Pivot's tool dock system, which is a neat little tool pouch accessory they also sell. It's also got integrated mounts for Fox Live Valve if you go in full baller mode. I'm not, so let's just stick that back on. Under the frame there's a huge rubber guard, which is always handy. Plus extra bottle or tool mounts, and a nice access hatch which I can only assume is to help with fitting a dropper cable. Details aside, I'm stoked because this frame is zero compromise for me. It's exactly what I want for my riding style. 27.5-inch wheels, short 430mm chainstays, very low top tube and playful suspension and geometry. Plus, it's actually gorgeous. It's great to see a brand offer a fun, playful model rather than making everything 29-inch and super slack, although they do offer that too. Enough chat though, let's get this bad boy built, starting with the headset. No bike is immune from my usual headset fitting lump of wood, however, this frame doesn't use cups, so there's nothing to smash in. Shame. Convenient, but shame. I've had comments from folks shocked I don't use grease on headsets, so this one's for you. At this point, I'd normally fit the fork, however, it'll just fall out again. So I'm going to break protocol and skip forward to the stem. I'm crazy like that sometimes. This sexy little lump is a Pivot own brand. It's 45 by 35mm clamp and does what it says on the tin. Now you're acquainted with the stem, let me introduce the front boinger. This is made by the cute thief's mortal enemy, the Fox. It's the 36 performance model with 160mm travel and 44mm offset. But more importantly, the graphics match. As a wannabe button collector, I've just added 2 more to my collection, with these ones on the back of the fork. You can never have too many buttons, and now that I've got them, I'm going to fit these buttons to my bike. I'm going to add 2 spacers, as I don't want a slammed cockpit. A bit of height helps with the bunny hoppos. However, there's still far too much length here, which is definitely not what she said. Now, because I don't have a workbench with a vise at the moment, I'm going to try something people have recommended in previous videos. With my steerer marked, I'm going to cut it with a pipe cutting tool. The advantage of these is that I don't need a vise or guide. It'll cut straight and I can just hold it as I do it. It takes a little while, but eventually I get a nice neat cut. There's still some bill burrs to take care of though, but this tool comes with its own inner and outer deburrer. This pipe cutter is convenient, but the downside is they leave a bulge in the tube, which takes a lot more effort to remove than cutting with a saw. That took a lot of endurance, but eventually the bulge went down. Even though lots of people recommended the pipe cutter, I still prefer a saw and guide. Before I finally fit the fork, I'm going to do one more thing to it. And that's cutting a thread so I can fit this 1UP top cap. 1UP supply their own tap and guide, so again, I don't need a workbench or vise for this. After adding some lube, it's just a case of using an Allen key as a lever and carefully cutting until it bottoms out. Once done, I now have enough threads for the top cap. This is usually done so you can use a 1UP tool stored in the steerer, but for me it makes a super easy way to run the front brake up there and avoid it getting tangled in stunts. I mean, come on, I can hardly be expected to ride this bike normally, can I? I do wish 1UP would put deeper teeth in this top cap though. It's quite shallow and can be easy to have the tool slip and make a mess. Speaking of, the tool is just a cassette tool. Now once I have the hose through here, I will have to modify one with a slot if I want to be able to tighten my headset with the brake fitted. A bit inconvenient, but I still really like this solution. Now the bar is another Pivot own brand, but it's a rather lightweight carbon model, which is nice. And I can confirm it has some shapes, but does it have some sounds? You bet it does. Using my best 1000-yard stair, I get it fitted in no time at all. Look at that concentration. It is looking so cool, but no time to stop and stare. Still got loads more bits to fix. As is tradition, it's time for some infinity. These mind-melting mathematical concepts are made by Light Bicycle. Now, I did a whole video on these last week, so please check it out if you'd like to know more. Link at the end of the video. Sadly, this roll of Schwalbe tubeless tape isn't infinite. I think I'd need a bigger garage for that, but there should be enough here to do quite a few wheels. Rimpack still make what I consider the best inserts, and have kindly supplied me with some original V1 models. However, I think I'll only run one in the rear. That said, I like the valves, so I'd dig one out. The reason I won't be using one in the front is because I'm adding another mathematical wonder, this Schwalbe Magic Mary, which comes with some pretty burly sidewalls. Tan sidewalls at that, very nice. This will be my first time using Schwalbe rubber on the mountain bike, but I've heard great things, so I'm looking forward to it. Now, what happens when you add two infinite constructs together? You get a tubeless setup, that's what. Though, to finish it off, I need to fill the infinite shapes with a finite addition, air. And I need to get a new glove. That was quite a violent jump cut. Now, I love air. I can't get enough of this stuff. I honestly don't think I could survive without it. Perhaps I'm an addict. I'm definitely feeling some withdrawal symptoms without my air compressor. Fortunately, this rim and tyre combo easily inflates with a track pump, so I can get my fix. With this hoop done, I try to shoot it. After just about destroying my lighting rig, the next logical step is to add some sealant. Annoyingly, my valve removal tool is buried in a box somewhere, so I decide to pop off a bead and add it that way instead. Annoyingly, my still sore finger from my recent dislocation is making it a little tricky to force the tyre off. Fortunately, as if by magic, I legit got a delivery right at this moment with some Unia promotional goodies. There's a spoiler for my future tool supplier, by the way, which included these tyre levers. Thanks Unia, Thunia. Sticking with Schwalbe, I'll be using some of their Dock Blue sealant. Other than this technique being awful for showing my double crown bald spot, it's a pretty easy way to add the sealant. And with all that inflated and sealed, I realised the valve isn't remotely lined up with the logo. After some unbroadcastable words with myself, I redid the tyre fitting properly. You guys wouldn't let me live it down if I left it as it was. Before I fit the wheel, here's a spoiler for the brakes I'll be using, although hardly much of a spoiler if you've watched my channel for a while. Either way, it makes sense to fit these 203mm Hayes rotors now. I was going to fit this rotor with a normal Torx key as usual, but behind the camera I have some power tools I've been using to build this bike cave, and a genius idea came to mind. Why be a chump and use muscles when I can let a machine do it for me? Sometimes my brilliance shocks me. Just to be on the safe side, I do a manual check just to make sure they're all tight. You know what? I've learned something today. My brilliance certainly does have limits, and so do disc rotor bolts. Why didn't you warn me that a high-powered drill might not be such a good idea? In some way, I think we're all to blame. Let's just hope I haven't ruined these lovely Industry 9 hubs with my laziness. Oh, you thought just one snapped? Yeah, no, it was a couple. Fortunately, I got them out with no damage done. That would have been an awkward email otherwise. So, with lessons learnt, let's do the same thing again. Only a little more gently this time. Oh, come on, I said gently. That's better. After a manual nip down and tighten, all the bolts survived, and so did my sponsorship. After making my swear jar a little heavier, I can finally fit the front wheel. That was so much fun, I fancied doing it again. Time for the rear wheel. Same deal as the front, with light bicycle sorting out the wheel. Again, more detail on my last video. But I will mention that I'm excited to use 690 engagement points on a mountain bike. It should make trials and technical climbs way nicer. For the rear, I wanted something a little more playful, so I opted for a Hans Dampf. This bike's no mullet, but I still wanted business up front and a party out back. That said, it's not like these aren't grippy, but they should roll faster and be a little better for jibbing with compared with something more aggressive like a Big Betty. The sidewalls are a little lighter than the Magic Mary though. Because of that, and my trials tendencies to land on sharp corners rear wheel first, I will be using a rim packed insert this time. Only half power this time, as I need to insert the insert first. There's plenty of inserts out there. Now, I've not used all of them, but I've not really felt like I needed to try anything else after using the rim packs. They're cheaper, lighter, have great protection, and are one of the easiest ones to fit. There's no wonder these have won over loads of reviewers. But that said, there's still a bit of a technique needed. First, I stretch the insert onto the rim. Then, as I'm fitting the bead, I lift the insert up and poke the bead under it. You basically want to get the tyre onto the rim's central channel as much as possible. If the bead gets too tight, go back around and really make sure the bead is under the insert. Before I fully seat the tyre, I'll add the sealant. This is tricky with the insert fitted, and I'd rather add it via the valve afterwards, but yeah, I am wasting my time digging around for that tiny tool, which is actually something she said. I've never had to resort to tie levers with these inserts before, but a combination of a tighter bead and a sore finger means I have no choice this time. The shame. A little bit messier this time, but at least I got the logo and valve in the right place. I've made the mistake before of not cleaning up sealant straight away, so after a wipe down, it's time to try my luck with the rotor bolts again. Gently, gently. No impressions of my uncle Jeremy Clarkson, no relation, and his lust for power this time. I get the bolts most of the way in and finish it with the fine finesse only my delicate hands can provide. Much better. And with that done, let's go analog and fit the cassette. This dinner plate sized beast is a Shimano XT. Not sure on the teeth count, but it has plenty. Despite how easy I make this look, fitting a microspline cassette is definitely a little trickier than other types, but it did all go smoothly in the end. Let's turn this unicycle into a bicycle. Moving on, it's time to fit the arse bearing, and this is the first bike I've built that has a press fit version. And this is it. Weird to see a plastic version, but press fit arse bearings are notorious for creaking. Can plastic creak though? Is that why it's plastic and not alloy? As I ponder life's mysteries, I slabber up the bottom hole with plenty of lube. I was tempted to just chuck this at the frame and hope it stuck like previous builds, but I figured that wouldn't be a good look if it went wrong. I was then tempted to smack it in with a block of wood, but the little devil and angel had a fight at my shoulder, and the angel won. I ended up getting a cheap bearing press and pretended to be somewhat responsible. With the adulting successful, I would then fit these race face cranks. Not the lightest cranks in the world, but I'm a fan of steel axles, especially on bikes I aim to thrash like this. I shouldn't ever have to worry about these, even if I hit them when I inevitably mess up riding trials. I lube up the shaft and get them fitted. After all the swearing earlier, it was nice to have this fit together so smoothly. With the front and rear sprockets fitted, let's add some teeny ones, which happens to be attached to this flipping XTR mech. The kid inside me is very excited by this, and oh boy, that sounded so wrong. What I mean is, when I was young, Shimano XTR had this mythical status. It was an actual fantasy to use it. The closest I got was an XT rear mech back in the day, and I couldn't believe I was just one down from it. I've had XTR stuff since then, but that status has never left my mind. One thing I'm not as excited by is the chain, and that's purely because I've never used a Shimano chain before, and ever since I had a chain snap leading me to using some more sensitive male parts of my stem to catch my fall, leading to a rather embarrassing hospital trip, I've always been a bit nervous about using chains I've never tried before. That said, technology has come a long way in the 20 years since I did that, and I'm pretty sure Shimano makes some very good chains, so my nervousness is probably misguided. Lengthwise, I'm going to take a bit of a guess that it's too long. I'm going to cut it down and later I'll confirm the correct length, but don't ask me why I just didn't do all this later. If, like me, you thought the next logical step would be to fit the shifter and set the gears, well, you'd be dead wrong. The shifter uses a matchmaker clamp, so I can't attach this to the bar on its own. So the next step, logical or not, has to be fitting of the brakes. So let's not mess about. Hayes have been very generous and sent me a pair of my favourite ever brakes, the Dominion A4. These have been out for a while, but haven't seemed to be noticed much. It's great to see some bigger teams like the Athertons now using these, as they're seriously good brakes, and definitely worth checking out. This would be my first time using them on a mountain bike, and I'm genuinely excited to see how the super light lever action and controllable power helps with my arm pump. They're also the easiest brakes to set up due to the crosshair grub screws on the tabs. As I said earlier, this bike isn't going to be ridden normally, so it's time to shove the hose up the steerer. This is where having such a gaping hole at the top makes life easier. The hose easily popped through. At this point, I also like to adjust the banjo on the caliper to make the hose angle a little bit neater. The one up top cap also came with a bottom cap. I assume this is to stop mud getting all up in there, but I figured if I cut a slot in it, it would make a perfect hose guide. I can feel my brilliance swelling again. Sorry bike, this will be cold. And wouldn't you know it, it works like a charm. With all that done carefully, I didn't need to bleed the brake, and now I can do bar spins for days. Well, in the work stand at least anyway. With the front done, it's time to fit the back one. This one will be slightly more involved though, as this frame has infernal routing. To start with, I fit it all externally. This way I can confirm the brake is all set up and working. Then I remove the rear wheel to give full access to the ports. And then it's a case of taking the hose out from the lever and threading it through the frame. Even though I'm getting this bike as a sponsorship, I'm not going to pretend this was fun. Maybe I don't have the technique dialed, but my pal Ross said I should have used a piece of string and a hoover to suck it through and then use that to pull the hose. It would be cool if the frame had full-length internal guides, but oh well. I'm sure if I had Ross's brains or a proper internal hose fitting kit, this would have been pretty simple. After a few attempts trying to fish out the hose with a small Allen key, I found using a hoop of wire as a lasso worked well. But with the down tube having a bit more space inside it, it was a fair bit easier to do than the chainstay. To keep things quiet, Pivot used foam tubes over the hose, so I fit that next. Once all done, I fit the hose to the lever and see how much fluid I lost. I certainly lost some liquid out of my eyes with this process. Well yeah, it's hard to be that intrusive and not lose at least a little bit of fluid. This does give me the opportunity to bleed the brake, which is thankfully a really easy thing to do. The back brake is now fitted and it feels solid. Plus, the hose is long enough for at least one full rotation in either direction. With that detour done, I can now get the shifter fitted and see about kicking things up a few gears. I forgot my contact lenses for this bit, sorry. This time I thread the cable top down and I already have the foam tube pre-installed. I tried to use my wire loop to snag the cable, but in the end I didn't need to. It saw the light and popped straight out. No fluid lost from me this time, and with the cable clamped up, I check the gears. Having only used SRAM in the last few years and finding it pretty strong and reliable, this Shimano drivetrain has some big boots to fill. But just like me, after a couple of shots of tequila, I'm finding it particularly smooth and easy. Now that I know the gears work, I want to confirm the chain length. It looks pretty decent, but I always like it to be the shortest possible to stop any chain slap. To do this, I violently undo the shock and I'll compress the rear end to see how tight the chain gets. Now this does actually look pretty decent, but if I move the mech, there's actually still loads of slack there. Plus, it's not like I'm going to be hucking the bike in the lightest climbing gear and bottoming the bike out. Well, at least I don't plan to. I took out just a single link and I'm happy with the result. With the shock fitted, I'm getting nearer completion. But let's attack the seat post next. It has a matching wolf tooth lever, which looks really nice. Now I could use a matchmaker clamp for this too, but it came with its own, and I'm a lazy guy sometimes. While I've been building this bike, I have been thinking the silver clamp didn't really match anything. I do have this purple one which also doesn't match, so I use that instead. Before I get started with the post and cable, let's see what this access hatch is all about. Awesome, this should make getting the cable around the corner much easier. With both brakes and the rear mech fitted, the frame was starting to get a little crowded inside, but with a little patience and a poke with a stick, I managed to get the cable down and around the arse and then up the seat tube. This seat post has a cable nipple at the bottom, which makes fitting way easier. This is the first time I've actually ever used a cable activated dropper, and I like this detail. I also really like the ability to slam this 200mm post in the frame. No weird kinks here, but if your frame has a weird kink, I'm no judge. With the cable clamped at the lever, that's the system fitted, and yep, the bars can still fully rotate. Feels so nice. Though to properly try it out, I need to add this chair, which is a Pivot branded WTB model. I've not ridden mountain bikes enough to have a favourite chair yet, so I'll give this a try and see how it feels. Ha, well, it's definitely more aggressive than my last dropper, but that's a good thing. For the gripperoos, Saddleback has sent me some Wolftooth Echo models. Just like my food, I can be a bit picky with grips. These pass the texture test though, with a decent feeling rubber and pattern. The only unknown is the thickness. I'm not the biggest fan of a large girth, but I'm not scared. I'll give them a good try and see how I get on. Semi-related to grips, I also got this really cool concealed toolkit. Fingers crossed I don't need a concealed carry license for these. But these have most of the tools you'd ever need in an emergency and store neatly inside your bars. But I think I'll save these for my other bike I'm building soon, and I'll just use normal bar plugs for this one. One item left, but I'm possibly saving the best to last. A pair of Scottish-made pinned CS2 pedals with titanium axles and pins. They were also kind enough to customize these with my logo too, and how cool is that? I've been using a pair of these for over a year on my trials bike, and I love the shape, grip and strength. I'm super keen to try them on the mountain bike too. So, other than double checking some bolts and air pressures, that's the bike finished. It's absolutely gorgeous. I'll get those checks done and then see how it handles some stunts outside. First things first, how does it wheelie? Other than some noises from the pads knocking the caliper, which should go away with some use, the bike seems to love being on the rear wheel. And it's not too shabby on the front either. I'm really pleased the cable routing is working like a charm too. But my bar spins need some work. I can tell I'm going to love this bike. It seems to really handle jibs nicely. The next test will be to see how it copes with the hills, but that's going to have to wait. So, what do you think? Of course, I've got to give a huge thanks to all the brands that have helped with this build. Light Bicycle, Schwalbe, Rimpact, Industry 9, Hayes, Pinned, and of course Pivot Bikes UK/Saddleback, who have not only supplied a couple of bikes, but also other cool products from brands such as Silka, Wolftooth, and Troy Lee Designs. The latter you'll see me wearing in all my mountain bike content. Without their help, this bike simply wouldn't have been possible. Most importantly though, the cute thief seems to approve. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care, bye bye.